الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the course organized by the Academy for Learning Islam. Our course is titled Miracles of the Quran, and we have two sessions in total, one that we are conducting today and one that we will be conducting next week at the same time. The topic is an important topic because I'm sure that many of you may be talking about the Quran to your non-Muslim friends. And one of the questions that they will ask you is, why do you believe in the Quran? And why do you think it is a book that has been revealed by God? And what is so miraculous about the Quran? And how many of us would be able to clearly state that these are the 5 or 6 different categories of miracles in the Quran, and for each category be able to furnish 1 or 2 clear examples, not examples where you have to do mental gymnastics, but examples which are understandable to everyone that this is in fact a miracle of the Quran. And not only with our non-Muslim friends, but you will find that even within our own family, with our children, or even perhaps for ourselves. Sometimes the Quran, given the context in which it was revealed, can be difficult for us to read, and sometimes difficult for us to also convey why we believe in it as a miracle and a book of God. And so this course is designed to help us understand that. Now, the course itself is divided into 2 parts. Today, we will not be looking at the miracles of the Quran. That is something that we're going to be looking at next week. But today we do want to talk about the concept of miracles itself. Why do we need miracles? What do miracles demonstrate? And what are some of the qualities that a miracle should have? Alaykum assalam, according to the Quran. And our course for today is going to be broken down into the following outline. We'll start with an introduction to Quranic terminology. What are the words used for a miracle in the Quran? And what does the Quran say about miracles? Secondly, we also have a study known as the study of Kalam or the science of Kalam. And in simple words, this is a study of our beliefs, an explanation of our beliefs, and also arguments for why we believe in what we believe in. The early Muslims called it Kalam. Now, in the study of Kalam, there is a particular terminology for a miracle. There is also a particular definition of what constitutes a miracle. How do you distinguish a miracle from other supernatural feats? And how do you distinguish miracles from, karamat, for example, supernatural feats which are carried out by pious people? And then we also want to discuss the purpose of miracles. What is the reason for why prophets used to furnish miracles? And we're going to go into some level of detail, and we are going to be discussing from the beginning to the end today, what does a miracle demonstrate, and what exactly is a miracle supposed to demonstrate? And this will bring us to a very interesting question. And in that question, we're going to be looking at certain verses of the Quran. Again, is that are miracles necessary? Now, it seems very, obvious to us that every prophet comes and he makes a claim that he is a prophet. He needs a proof to be able to back up his claim. And therefore, miracles are a proof that he is a prophet of God. Now, this is not the only proof. There could be other proofs, but miracles are an obvious proof that he is a prophet of God. But we still ask, are miracles necessary? And when we get to that slide, you will see what I mean by that question. We also are going to look at the Prophet's miracles other than the miracle of the Quran. And then finally, we'll end with a slide that will just outline for us the miracles of the Quran. There are about 6 to 7 different categories of miracles found in the Quran. Inshallah, we'll go into the details next week. Now, at any point during the conversation or during the presentation, you have a question, I do welcome your questions, and I ask you to ask them right away. When that question comes up to you, whilst we are discussing that particular slide, I'm sure that if you have a question, then others may also have the same question, and we can deal with it at that time. Also, finally, another reminder for those who joined us right now, that in about 10 minutes, we'll be taking a 3 to 4 minute break for me to be able to pray the Maghrib prayers, and all those who are joining us on the West Coast to pray their Maghrib prayers, and inshallah, we'll be continuing right after that. So before I proceed, I just need a confirmation that you're able to hear me very clearly, and that there are no problems in viewing me or viewing this. Okay. Thank you for that confirmation. All right. So let's begin with the Quranic terminology. Now, most of us would know miracles as a mu'jiza. However, the word mu'jiza does not appear in the Quran with the meaning of a miracle. The Quran does employ, however, other Arabic words to refer to miracles. And the most employed word in the Quran for a miracle is, in fact, an ayah. Ayah, which means a sign. And some of the Arabic lexicographers, those who write Arabic dictionaries, they have said that a sign is something which is obvious, but it denotes something which is not obvious to you. For example, when you're driving down the road and there is a signpost, well, the signpost itself is obvious, but the message in the signpost is something which is not obvious to you. For example, it's telling you that if you take this exit, it leads to a dead end. That message is not obvious, but then the sign makes it obvious. Now, the word ayah in the Quran is used for a number of things. It is used for the verses of the Quran which are separated from each other. It is also used for nature as well. Whenever God talks about His creation, He uses the word ayah to refer to His creation. And this is because when we look at the creation of God, it tells us something about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which may not directly be obvious for us. And the third manner in which the Quran uses the word ayah is to refer to miracles. And there are a number of verses that will use the word ayah, but I've got one verse for you over here. I'd like us to reflect upon this verse together. So over the discussion today, we'll be going over a number of verses. And whenever we come across these verses, I'd like us to reflect on it together and take away as much meaning as we can from these verses. So when the Prophet of Allah came to the people of Mecca and he presented the Quran to them, and they were amazed by the Quran, for it was neither poetry nor was it prose. It was something between poetry and prose, and it had some of very profound ideas and some of the highest moral messages in there. They still rejected the Prophet of Allah because of their ego, because of their selfishness, because they wanted to preserve what their grandfathers and their great-grandfathers had given them. So they turned to the Holy Prophet and they said to him, وَقَالُوا لَوْلَا نُزِّلَ عَلَيْهِ آيَةٌ مِّن رَبِّهِ. And they said to him, well, if only an ayah, a sign, a miracle was revealed to him from his Lord. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds to that objection by saying, قُلْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ قَادِرٌ عَلَىٰ أَن يُنَزِّلَ آيَةً. God is capable of revealing a sign and an ayah, وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. However, most of them do not know. Now, the question that I have for you over here is, why didn't God reveal a miracle at that time? You know, bring the dead back to life, for example, or give him a staff that he could throw down that would turn into a snake. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say that, well, God is capable, but God is not going to do that because most of them do not understand the repercussions of it, or they do not understand what they are saying. Why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala simply give the Prophet of Allah a very clear miracle, like bringing the dead back to life or turning something inanimate into something animate, so as to answer their charge? Hmm. And I want to remind you that any responses that you give, are valid responses. They give us something to talk about, and do not worry if you don't think that the response is a valid response. It's just an opportunity for us to talk about it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that they would not believe. Well, if God knew that they would not believe, then why even send a prophet for them? Um, because they thought that it would be a sorcerer. Even if God did this, it would not suffice, as they would probably keep asking for more. People were doubtful, and so they were not always accepted. Um, the Quran itself was sufficient as a miracle. So I think one of the points that's becoming clear from your responses is that it's not enough for a miracle to be there. It also needs a submissive heart that is seeking for the truth, a heart that is searching for the truth, a heart that will be willing to submit to the truth whenever and wherever it sees it, no matter what price it has to pay for it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing out to them, they don't understand that they don't have a heart that is willing to submit, because if they had a submissive heart, then even the smallest of miracles, in fact, not even miracles, the simplest of arguments would have convinced them. But when they don't have a heart that is a submitting heart, then even if you look at the example of Prophet Musa, where he brought so many signs to Fir'aun, and they would still... Sorry, my Azan timer has gone off. It is the time for Salat right now. So I'll just finish this point and inshallah take a break. I ask you to remain with us for 3 to 4 minutes. And then inshallah we'll continue with the session. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pointing out to them that, if they had a submissive heart, then even the most simple of arguments would have convinced them. And if they don't have a submissive heart, then no matter how many miracles the Prophet of Allah would bring for them, they would still not submit to it. Another point that also comes out from the Quran is that once a miracle like the one that they were asking for is presented to them, where the difference between the ghaib and the shahada, the seen and the unseen, is broken down, where they're able now to see what is unseen, or they're able to see a break in the natural order of things, then if they were to reject, then there would be severe consequences to that. And we see that in the example of the camel of Prophet Saleh, when they decided to reject the command of Allah in respecting that camel, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala punished them. We see this in the case of Prophet Musa as well. And so Allah says that if we were to bring some of these miracles, لَقُضِيَ الْأَمْرِ, the command would be complete, and they would face the clear punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, before I leave for Salat, there is one thing I'd like you to discuss, and you can view each other's responses. So I ask you to continue with that discussion. Is what do you think are the miracles of the Quran? And what do these miracles demonstrate? More importantly, what do these miracles demonstrate? Why did the Prophet of Allah need these miracles? What was the point that he was trying to convey? What was the claim that he was trying to prove, that these miracles helped him in proving that claim? I'll leave you with that question, inshallah, and I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you for continuing the discussion. So you have mentioned some of the miracles of the Quran, one of them being that it hasn't changed and it has not been distorted over the last 1400 years. The Quran is a miracle because it used the simple Arabic alphabet to create something that is so wonderful and amazing, both in terms of its literary style and in terms of its content. The Quran talks about scientific miracles, such as the formation of the embryo, or scientific facts, which were not known about 1400 years ago. And it tells us about the events of the past with accuracy, and it also prophesies some things in the future. And the Quran is also a book of guidance for everybody. So these are some important points that you have raised, and we are going to look at them critically in the coming week. Some of the miracles that we attribute to the Quran, are they really there in the Quran, or do we have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to be able to demonstrate those miracles? And then there are some miracles which are very obvious that we may have missed, and that we can clearly use to point out the divine nature of the Quran. The question that I want you to focus on is that what is the Prophet of Allah trying to demonstrate with these miracles? What is the claim that he is trying to prove? And that will help us to understand why are miracles necessary, or in what area are they necessary. So let that question bother and nag you as we are continuing our discussion. Another term used in the Quran for a miracle is a bayyinah. And in the Arabic language, bayyinah means a clear argument or something that is clear. In fact, anything that is clear in Arabic is said to be bayyin, or something that what used to be ambiguous and is no longer ambiguous, something that has been clarified or clarified something else is called a bayyinah. And the Quran uses this word by itself and sometimes uses it as an adjective for the ayat. The ayat meaning the miracles that God has given to his prophets, or the arguments that God has given to his prophets. And this gives us a very important quality of miracles in the Quran, an important characteristic of miracles according to the Quran. And that important characteristic is that a miracle has to be obvious. It should be easily understandable. Everybody or most people should be able to appreciate it. And this is why we see that the miracle during the time of Prophet Musa was something that was similar to magic, but far greater than magic, because people appreciated magic at that time. During the time of Prophet Isa, it was healing and medicine, but far greater than healing and medicine. And during the time of the Holy Prophet, the style of the Quran was a miracle as well, because that is what the people could appreciate at that time. Therefore, according to the Quran, a miracle has to be bayyin, or it has to be bayyinat. It has to be clarifying and clear. Now, the word bayyina in the Quran is employed with the meanings of clear argument and also a clear miracle. And this is an important verse in Surah Al-Hadid, verse number 25, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ. We have sent our prophets with bayinat, with manifest proofs. Here, according to the Mufassirin, bayinat can mean two things. We have given them very clear arguments. We have given them rational arguments. And two, bayinat also means miracles. We have given them miracles. And God says, and we have also given them, وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ. We have revealed with them the book. Right? And this refers in particular to the Ulul Azm prophets, who were given some form of a written book. And this is very interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would refer to all the books that have been revealed, instead of saying we have given them a book, kitaban, or we have given them books, kutuban. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and we have given them the book, meaning all of them a singular book. And it is, verses like this, expressions like this, where something is odd that should bother and nag us when we are reciting the Quran. What does this mean? I will move on. Wal mizana, and the scale. And according to most mufassirin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them the sharia, because the sharia is the standard by which we judge our actions, whether they are correct or not, whether they are permissible or not, whether they are wrong or not. And that's why God refers to the sharia as the mizan. So Allah says, we have given them one, clear arguments. Two, we have given them miracles. Three, we have given them a book. And four, we have given them a way of life, a sharia. For what purpose? لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. So that human beings may develop and manage their societies on the basis of fairness and on the basis of justice. And this is one of those verses which tells us that our political engagement and our political involvement is very, very important. And there can be debates and discussions about what type of political engagement is permissible or not. But some level of engagement, with what is happening in our society is very important. The third term that the Quran uses, and we will quickly gloss over this, is the word burhan. And the word burhan in the Arabic language means proof. And the Quran again will employ the word burhan with two meanings. The first meaning, a very clear argument, an argument that gives evidence to a claim. So prophets of God came with a claim. Okay? And their claim was that they had a special relationship with God, that God spoke to them, that God revealed things to them, that they speak on behalf of God. So we use the word prophet in the English language to refer to Anbiya, to refer to the messengers of God. And in the English language, sometimes the word prophet is used for someone who prophesies, who tells the future. However, in our kalam, according to the Quran, a Nabi is a person who primarily has a special relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants him to say. He conveys to us messages, moral messages, messages about our belief from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a prophet comes and makes a claim that he is a prophet of God. Well, he needs a proof for that claim. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we have given them burhan, a proof. Now, this proof comes in the form of rational arguments and also in the form of miracles. The verse that you have in front of you is from Surah Al-Qasas. And Surah Al-Qasas talks about the story of Prophet Musa. When Prophet Musa went to Fir'aun, he went with him with a number of miracles. One of the miracles was turning the stick or the staff into a snake. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the second miracle that we gave him, "Usluk yadaka fi jaybik," put your hand into your pocket, or according to some of the mufassirin, under your arm. تَخْرُجْ بَيْضَاءَ مِنْ غَيْرِ سُوءٍ. When you pull it out, it will come out bright, white and illuminated. It will not be dark. وَضْمُمْ إِلَيْكَ جَنَاحَكَ مِنَ الرَّهَبِ. And the commentators say this means that put your hand on your heart so as to calm yourself down from any fear or any anxiety. And the Quran tells us that when Prophet Musa went in the court of Fir'aun, he had a little bit of anxiety. And this anxiety was not with respect to his own confidence, whether he would be able to fulfill or whether he would be able to carry out those miracles or not. But a little bit of the anxiety was also because of the people. Would they accept or would they not accept? When they would see the magic carried out by the magicians of the time, would they be overcome with awe or not? And there's a whole story with respect to that. That is one of the fears that he had. Then look at the verse. It says, فَذَانِكَ بُرْهَانَانِ مِنْ رَبِّكَ. Then these two are proofs or burhan from your Lord. So the Quran employs three terms. Ayah for miracle, bayyina, something clear for miracle, and burhan, proof for miracle. Now we come to the study of kalam. And in our theology, the term used for miracle is a mu'jiza. And a mu'jiza is used for those supernatural actions which are carried out by prophets of God. And the Arabic word mu'jiza comes from the word i'jaz. And i'jaz means to incapacitate, to make somebody incapable. And a person who is ajiz is a person who is incapable. Okay? And miracles were called mu'jiza because other people who lived at that time, they were not capable of reproducing the same miracle. They were not capable of reproducing the same action that was produced by that person claiming to be a prophet of God. And that is why it was called a mu'jiza. Now, the scholars of Kalam, they point out, not every supernatural action is a miracle. To be a miracle, it has to fulfill certain criteria. In particular, they mention four qualities of a miracle. Brother Ghulam Abbas is asking that his right hand, so the hand was not just bright, it was illuminated, it was filled with light, It was not normal, it was abnormal, it wasn't something that another person would have been able to do. It was something that he was only himself uniquely able to do. And so when he did that and he showed that to them, that was another example of a miraculous act that he was performing. Okay? So they say that a miracle must have certain characteristics. And I quickly want to go over these characteristics with you. The first one is that, well, obviously it has to be a supernatural feat. It cannot be an ordinary feat. It has to be something that amazes people, something that they're not used to seeing, or something that they do not think is possible. Turning a staff into a snake or bringing the dead back to life is something that normally is not possible. Now, obviously, a miracle is going to be something that is scientifically abnormal. Sometimes our brothers and sisters ask, well, are miracles scientifically possible? And if they are not scientifically possible, then how come the Quran is not scientific? How come our theology is not scientific? Well, miracles are not scientifically possible. That's why they're called miracles. Science only explains how things normally happen. It explains normal causality. Science is not able to explain what gives causality to the objects that we have, to the causes that we have, and that causality can be removed from it. So miracles do break the normal understanding of causality that we have, the normal order of things that we have come to understand. Are miracles logically impossible? Can miracles do those things which are logically impossible, which are not rationally possible? You know, for example, somebody could claim that bringing the dead back to life is not logically possible, is not rationally possible. So here the scholars point out that, look, there is a difference between something that's not ordinarily possible and something that's not logically possible. When God does a miracle, he does something that's not normally possible. It doesn't mean that he's doing something that's not logically possible. Things which are not logically possible do not happen, cannot happen. Now, something that's not logically possible is, for example, for two things which are completely opposite to be correct at the same time. Okay? For example, for a pen to be black and completely white at the same time. Those are two opposites which cannot coexist at the same time. To do that would require to do something which is logically impossible. Miracles do not do things which are logically impossible. They only are doing something which is normally and ordinarily not possible. Okay? That's a very important point. And it goes back to another discussion that we have in our kalam, which we'll not go into today, but it's something that your children may ask you or something that's bothering you. Can God do something that's not logically possible? Does God's power, is God so powerful that he can do something that's logically not possible? And I think that that question may have been formulated to you in the following manner, where somebody may have asked you, can God lift, or can God create a stone that he cannot lift himself? Okay? And we're stuck sometimes trying to answer that question. That's where that discussion belongs. Secondly, it's carried out by someone who claims to be a prophet. And it's carried out with the intention of proving his prophethood. It only proves that he has a special relationship with God. Okay? And that's an important distinction that I'm making, and you will see in a short while why that distinction is important. But it only proves that he is a prophet of God. Now, other people, for example, our imams who were not prophets, or the awliya of Allah, very pious people, they may also carry out supernatural feats. But it is not accompanied with a claim to prophethood. And therefore, instead of being called mu'jiza, those are called karamat. The Arabic term used in kalam, used in our theology, is karamat. And the important distinction there is that it's not accompanied with a claim to prophethood. Thirdly, it's accompanied with a challenge to reproduce the same, meaning that it is something that is unique to him, something that others cannot do, something that is not ordinary, something that the prophet is confident, and he challenges others and says that if you can do the same, then try to reproduce the same. And the Quran does that over and over again. And it says that if you think that the Quran is not a miracle, then why do you not produce something that is in its literary style similar to the Quran? And it says that to the people who lived in Arabia during the time of the Prophet. And finally, it cannot be taught or learned. And that's an important distinction as well, because you will find that sometimes there are yogis in India who will perform certain acts which are supernatural, or sometimes things which we cannot normally do. They may be able to sleep on a bed of nails. They may be able to eat things which we are not able to do, or even perhaps levitate themselves. Or it is claimed that they can do that. But it is something that can be taught and something that can be learned, whereas the miracles performed by prophets of God is not normally taught or learned. Before I continue further, does karama also have to match with logic? So thank you for asking that question. As we said, even miracles must be logical. They don't have to be normal. They're normally abnormal. It's not something that we see in normal day life, or something that we understand to be normally possible, but it has to be something that is logically possible. And if miracles of the Prophet have to be logically possible, then miracles of the Imams and the pious people, they also have to be logically possible. We also explained that they don't have to be scientific, because if they were scientific, then they wouldn't be miracles. They do break the laws of nature that we understand, and they do expose for us, and there's a subtle point in here, they do expose for us a higher level of causality which we do not normally see. Okay. What is the purpose of miracles? Why do prophets of God bring miracles with them? And of course, as we say, the purpose is to demonstrate their prophethood and their special relationship with God. And there are many other ways where a prophet can demonstrate his prophethood. One is that his prophethood is declared or announced by another prophet. For example, Prophet Musa informed the people that Harun was also a prophet. Prophet Dawood informed the people that Prophet Sulaiman was also a prophet. Prophet Yaqub perhaps informed the people that Prophet Yusuf was also a prophet, or Prophet Ishaq did that for Prophet Yaqub. Okay? In this case, there are 2 points which are important. First is that the prophethood of the latter, the one who is informing us, should be established independently and should be established in advance. And secondly, the indication should uniquely apply to the person claiming prophethood. Okay? So, the characteristics, the name, the qualities that he gives us can only apply to one person. And there's a very interesting discussion that we're not going to go into right now. The Quran says that we had given the characteristics of the Holy Prophet in the previous books, in the Tawrat and also in the Injil, or say in the Old Testament and also in the New Testament. To the extent that the Quran says when the scholars of the Ahlul Kitab in Arabia saw the Prophet of Allah, they recognized him كَمَا يَعْرِفُونَ أَبْنَاءَهُم, the way they would recognize their own children. Okay? And the Quran says the name that was given, the qualities and the characteristics, the speech of the Holy Prophet, and in fact, even the place where the Prophet would come. And you find that the Bible talks about Sa'ir, it talks about Paran, and the place of Paran, or Faran as we have in Arabic, is obviously Mecca. And the Bible talks about a prophet that is going to come in Mecca. There's a detailed speech on it. If you are interested in that, do remind me at the end of the lecture. I will give you a link to that discussion. Secondly, a prophet is also proven through an amalgamation of contextual indicators. These discussions are important, and they're going to be important because we're going to demonstrate the need for miracles. And what is it that a miracle exactly proves? And what is it that it does not prove? And why is it that some prophet brought miracles and perhaps some prophets did not bring miracles? And why is it that some prophets who brought miracles, when they were asked for other miracles, they did not present those miracles? No, in fact, when prophets of God came and they brought they had miracles, they did not present those miracles until the people asked them for it. Why? Why is it that prophets of God hold back from providing miracles? That's a question that should be vexing us. But in the event that they don't bring miracles and they have not been appointed by other prophets, then how do people know that this person who is claiming to be a Nabi or a Rasul is in fact a Nabi or a Rasul? So the scholars point out that you can put a number of pieces of evidence together to tell that this person is in fact a prophet of God. Now, this is called inductive reasoning, and we do this quite often in the sciences, where we take a number of different studies, you take a number of different data, you bring them all together. They could be in different areas. For example, the discussion itself aside, when it comes to evolution, the scientists who try to prove the theory of evolution, they will tell you that our data does not come from a single field of science. It comes from different fields. It comes from archaeology, it comes from biology, it comes from genetics, it comes from other fields as well. When we put all of that data together, then it brings about a certain sense of confidence, a certain sense of certainty that the theory of evolution is in fact true according to their claim. They will also tell you that if you look at any one piece of research or any one science, by itself is not sufficient. But when you amalgamate them, you put them together, it is sufficient to bring about that certainty within us. The scholars say in the same way, when you look at the circumstances around a person, sometimes you can amalgamate all of those circumstances and be certain that this person is a prophet of God. For example, they mention that number one, that person, you look at his character, he maintains integrity in his character. And I'm going to be quickly running through this because there are other discussions which I want to get to. Number two, if you look at his environment, he comes from an environment where there's a lack of civilization, a lack of progress, a lack of education, and yet he comes with very profound ideals and very profound information. Thirdly, you look at his followers. If they are people who are known to be good people and not people who have a personal agenda or a political agenda, then it tells you that this person must have something to say that is truly profound, and he must be touching people's hearts. Fourthly, you look at his methods, whether he uses rational or irrational methods, ethical or unethical methods. Do the ends justify the means for him or not? Or does he always maintain his ethics? Does he follow his own ethics? Number five, does he persevere or not? Right? For example, when he is facing the brink of death, does he still continue to believe in what he believes in, or does he give up his belief at that time? When he's paid a lot of money, does he still continue to believe in what he believes in? When his family is put into jeopardy, at that time, does he continue to believe in, for example, as we see the Prophet of Allah in the case of Mubahala, where he brought his family with him to show the amount of confidence that he had in his faith and in his teachings. And finally, you also look at his teachings, whether they are profound or not. Now, any one of these indicators may not be sufficient, but when we look at them all together, they may be sufficient to tell us that this person is indeed a prophet of God. And of course, the third means of indicating the prophethood of a prophet is through miracles. Now, I have a question for you before we continue. What does a miracle, how does a miracle demonstrate that the one who is performing that miracle is a prophet of God? It just demonstrates that he has got a relationship with the metaphysical world. How does it demonstrate that in fact he's got a relationship with God? That God speaks to him, that God wants him to speak on his behalf. Maybe it just demonstrates that he has a relationship with the jinn, or he has a relationship with, say, I don't know, say with aliens, or he has a relationship with the shayateen. How does it demonstrate that this person must be a prophet of God? Because if we cannot establish this point, then it doesn't matter how many miracles we show in the Quran. All it is going to do is to show that yes, the Prophet of Allah somehow had access to the metaphysical world. But does it also mean that he speaks on behalf of God? Maybe not, right? So that's an important discussion for us to have. How does a miracle demonstrate that a person is indeed a messenger of God? I'd like to hear from you. Okay? So a person claiming to be a prophet could not perform such a miracle without God's permission. Why not? Why can't he perform such a miracle without God's permission? Why wouldn't God allow him if he was claiming to be a prophet? So he challenges others to do the same. That is correct. And all it proves is that others don't have a relationship with the metaphysical world the way he does. How does it prove that he has a special appointment that has been given to him by God? Okay, God controls the metaphysical world. Only his messengers can also control it in such ways. But what's your proof for that? That is a statement that has been made. It's also to some extent a correct statement. But where is the proof? What particular statement or reality is broken when others can also perform miracles? Okay, so some good points being mentioned over here. Let's go through the next set of slides. And I think it's also important for us to be able to explain our theology in a very clear manner, with a very clear argument, and also recognize that things are not allowed in our theology when they question. It's a very important statement now, one that if you're taking notes, you want to write this one down. Things are not allowed in our theology when they question the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they negate some of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, why do we have to have a hereafter? Well, you could argue that there are people who have gone through injustice in this world. So what is wrong with that? The answer is that it goes against the justice of God. It questions the justice of God. Or, for example, somebody could say that the life of this world is not purposeful enough by itself. The purpose has to be realized somewhere. Some people go through hardship for 30 to 40 to 50 to 70 years in this world. Well, why? So what's wrong if it's not purposeful? Well, this is because God is wise and God does not do those things which are not purposeful. Again, it goes back to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If God would allow a person who is not a prophet, who claims to have a special relationship with God, to carry out miracles, it would go against his quality that he is al-Hakim, that he is wise. And the argument is presented in this manner, and we are running out of time. So I will quickly just read the argument, and I ask you to follow it with me on the slides that are in front of you. So one, God is al-Hakim, and a person who is wise never acts in a manner that nullifies or negates his outlined objectives. And the objective that God has in sending the prophets is to guide mankind, is to provide them with the beliefs, the values, and the way of life that they need. Number 3, when an individual performs a miracle, now people have a good reason to follow him. Not everyone will follow him, but people have a justified reason. They have a rational argument to follow him and to accept his pronouncements. If God allows impostors to perform miracles, then they may misguide a whole segment of the society. And if God allows for that, then it goes against his own purpose. And that purpose is to guide people. And if it goes against his own purpose, it questions his hikmah. It questions his wisdom. And therefore, because it negates the wisdom of God, it would never be possible for a person who is not a prophet of God to perform miracles. That is a firm theological argument. Okay. Now, I am going to leave you with one question. Before we come to that question, I'm just going to go forward to the last few slides that I have, and then we'll come back to that question. So before we come to that question, some of the miracles of the Prophet outside the Quran is the splitting of the moon, what is known as Shaqqul Qamar, and there is a surah in the Quran that talks about it. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. I believe it is Surah Al-Qiyamah. And there's a discussion over there if this truly happened or not. But it seems from most of the historians and our scholars that splitting of the moon is one of the miracles of the Holy Prophet. Secondly, the Mi'raj, or the nightly ascension, which he was able to prove to the people of Arabia that he had in fact left Mecca and come back to it in a period of one night. Third, prophecies that he made, which are not mentioned in the Quran. For example, he told Imam Ali about the battles that he would have to fight. He would sometimes prophesy that there would be rain and the rain would come down. He told Ammar bin Yasir who would kill him. He told Abu Dhar how he would die. These were prophecies that he made, and those prophecies came true. There are also narrations of the Prophet of Allah having conversations with animals, and the Sahaba saw it, and also conversation with inanimate beings. For example, a stone that gave shahada and testimony to the oneness of God and the prophethood of the Holy Prophet. Answering of his supplications when he would make dua, when he would pray for somebody to get cured, when he would pray for success, when he would pray for victory in the battlefield. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would grant it to him. And the sixth one is the Quran. Now when we come to the Quran, there are about 7 types of miracles in the Quran. Somebody said that one of the miracles of the Quran is the number of types of miracles that you have in the Quran. 1, there is complete internal harmony in the Quran. And I'm going to be describing what this means next week. 2, there are profound ideas presented by an ummi, a person who was not taught to read and write. Okay? 3rd is the literary style of the Quran, the eloquence of the Quran. 4, accurate scientific facts, which nobody could have known 1400 years ago, especially, for example, in the field of astronomy. 5, there are historical accuracies. When the Quran mentions the stories of the previous prophets and the previous rulers, you find that sometimes, or we find that when the Quran mentions certain details, then those details are very, very accurate. Number 6, prophecies in the Quran. And there are certain prophecies which were made in the Quran, some of which would have been very easy for the mushrikeen to negate, and yet that did not happen. The most important one, and the one that we will focus on, is the transformative miracle of the Quran, and we'll see what that means next week. But I come back to the slide where we talk about, are miracles necessary? And I want you now to follow me in this argument, and I want you to think about it, to reflect over it. So the prophets of God, when they came to their people, they focused on preaching the right beliefs and reviving intrinsic fitri values. If we look at the life of the Holy Prophet, when he came to the people of Mecca, and Mecca is where miracles were needed. Once the Prophet of Allah went to Medina, and he was preaching the details of Islam, he was preaching the details of the Sharia, He gave us Islamic law. Over there, his prophethood was already accepted. So there are miracles. People would not come to him demanding for miracles. But mostly in Mecca, people would demand for miracles. Okay? And this is at a time when the Prophet of God is preaching the right set of beliefs. He is preaching Tawheed. He is preaching Ma'ad, that there is life after death. He is reviving Fitri values. You also agree with me that they furnished rational arguments to demonstrate the beliefs. If the Prophet told us that there is one God, then there are so many rational arguments in the Quran for why there is only one God. When the Prophet says that there is life after death, and you look at the surah of Yasin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides us with rational arguments for why there has to be life after death. So, when they wanted to demonstrate their beliefs, they demonstrated it by using rational arguments. They also called on people to revert to their conscience, to revive good values. The Prophet would tell them, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ? Do you not use your intellect? Do you not refer back to your conscience? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَهَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. God has taught you right or wrong from the day that He created you and you were growing up. There are many examples of where people came to the Holy Prophet and the Prophet of Allah simply asked them to return back to their hearts and their conscience to realize that the values that he was preaching were the right values. So then I ask you that if miracles were required to demonstrate their arguments, whether it was beliefs or values, wouldn't it imply that either their belief system was not rational, was not rationally explainable, and so they needed miracles to prove those beliefs, or their arguments that they were presenting, na'udhu billah, we seek refuge from Allah, that their arguments were not rational enough, their arguments were not logical enough, and so people needed miracles. You would say no, their arguments were rational, they were logical, people could think about them. Their values were values that people understood to be right, to be good, to be moral. Then, if that was the case, then why are miracles necessary? Then we should say that miracles are not really necessary. And I'm interested in hearing your responses to this. So in simple argument, if you say that miracles are required to make their points, to prove their points, then you must also come to the conclusion that their points are weak. Na'udhu billah, we seek refuge in Allah from such a conclusion, but that's the conclusion, and therefore, because they were not rationally strong, they were not logically tenable, therefore they had to bring miracles. Okay, the miracles reinforced what they were saying. So then, if you say they just reinforced, that means that miracles were not necessary. Would you agree with that then? I want you to understand the consequences then of the discussion. And that is that when we come to the Quran, this means that it's not necessary for us to demonstrate the miraculous nature of the Quran. In fact, when we are introducing the Quran, let's introduce the content of the Quran, the value system of the Quran, the belief system of the Quran. And this discussion on miracles is really a secondary or a tertiary discussion. I mean, that's the consequence of the discussion that we're having right now. We cannot see the Prophet, but we have the Quran. Yes, we do have the Quran, but either you say that the teachings of the Quran are self-evident, they're rational and logical, and if they are that way, then we don't need to go into the miracles of the Quran. Or we say that no, they're not rational, they're not evident by themselves, and they do need miracles to convince people that they are correct. Okay? All the answers were provided through the verses of the Quran. Okay. And then we have the answer that the intellectual abilities differ. Some people are convinced with logical explanations, and others need supernatural explanations. So that's the response that I was looking for. To say that these miracles are not necessary. It's only for people who sometimes are not able to grasp intellectual realities, or because of their upbringing, because of their experiences, because of their circumstances. Their societies are biased so much that for them to make that leap from what they were to what they need to become, they need to see something supernatural. Miracles were meant for them, but otherwise miracles themselves were not necessary to demonstrate the validity of the Quran. And this is not a claim that I'm making. Allama Tabatabai, in the tafsir of Al-Mizan, he has a very interesting paragraph in there under the discussions on one of the miracles. He says, and I ask you to follow me in this, in addition to this, the demonstration of the correct beliefs, proving the correct beliefs through firm proofs, through logical arguments, absolves the insightful scholar from needing to consider miracles. Once you've got rational arguments to prove the belief system of Islam, the value system of Islam, you no longer need to rely on miracles. And therefore it is said, Allama Tabatabai says, that miracles are meant to satisfy the common person, for his intellect may not comprehend the intellectual realities. As for the select, as for those who are learned, those who are intellectuals, those who have acquired knowledge, they do not, Allama says, it is said that they do not need such demonstrations. And this has implications then. The implication here is that yes, there are miracles in the Quran, scientific, historical, prophecies, literary style of the Quran. Those miracles are there. We will go through them in detail as well. But the more important point here is that when we are talking to people and we want to introduce the Quran to them, why not start with the values of the Quran? How the Quran talks about the concept of justice, how the Quran talks about the concept of independence, how the Quran talks about the concept of freedom, how the Quran talks about social concepts, how the Quran talks about the metaphysical world. That is the true miracle of the Quran. That is the most amazing aspect of the Quran. And we're going to look at that next week as well. There are a few other points that we were not able to complete today, but these are just examples from the Quran where you see that prophets of God were not in haste to present miracles. In fact, they wanted people to accept them for their arguments. They wanted people to accept the arguments because it made sense, because that is what the fitrah demanded, more so than they wanted to be accepted because of miracles that they performed. And if we understand this, it helps us to understand so many what we would consider irregularities in how prophets of God would demonstrate themselves. We're going to end over here, inshallah, because I have gone 5 or 6 minutes over the time limit. I will be here for the next 10 to or so minutes. If there are any other questions, then I will be answering them. Inshallah, we pray that you're able to join us next week, where we are going to look at some details of the miracles of the Quran. Until then, feel free to get in touch with me for any other clarifications via email. My email address is mbachoo, mbachoo @gmail.com. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.